Compliment came out smooth, the way a knife slides between ribs. It's so sweet you still believe in that little side hustle of yours, honey. Most women your age have given up the pipe dreams by now. That was my brother's new fiancée. Her name was Bridget. She sat at across a table covered in white linen at a place where the bread came with 3 kinds of butter, and she said it loud enough that the waiter glanced over before pretending he hadn't heard. The whole table laughed. Not a real laugh. The kind people do when they want you to know they agree, but they don't want to look mean about it. My father chuckled into his bourbon. My mother gave that little tinkling sound. She's perfected over 40 years of country club brunches. My brother, the groom-to-be, grinned and shook his head like, "Oh, Bridget, you can't say things like that," except he absolutely loved that she had. I'm 31. I've been hearing some version of this my whole life. If you've ever sat at a table where the people who are supposed to love you are picking at you for sport, drop a comment and tell me what you did. Or what you wish you'd done. I want to know. I didn't say anything. I picked up my water glass. I took a small sip. I set it down so the rim made a tiny clink against the silver charger. And in that little gap of silence, my future sister-in-law leaned forward and went in for round 2. I mean, you do graphic design or something, right? Like little Etsy stickers? My cousin did that for a while before she had kids. It's such a cute hobby. It wasn't graphic design. It hadn't been graphic design in 7 years. But I just smiled. Smiled the way I'd smiled at every Thanksgiving, every birthday, every family meeting my father liked to call when my brother was in trouble and needed a soft landing. I smiled the way invisible women learn to smile. Closed mouth. Eyes a little down. The smile that says, "Please continue. I'm not a person. I'm a piece of furniture." My mother, sensing the danger had passed, refilled her wine and turned to Bridget. "Now, sweetheart, tell us again about the Highland Park house. Is that the one with the wraparound?" And just like that, I was gone again. Erased at my own brother's engagement dinner. Let me tell you about my family before I tell you what happened next, because otherwise none of this lands right. My father, Wallace, made his money in commercial insurance in the 80s and never let anyone in the room forget it. My mother, Corinne, spent her entire adult life turning his money into a personality. She has a charity she chairs that I'm not entirely sure does anything. She has a hairdresser. She has flown in from Dallas. She has opinions about which neighborhoods are still nice and which ones have lost their character, and you can translate that however you want. My brother is named Trent. He's 2 years younger than me. He sells luxury cars at a dealership my father has a stake in, which is to say he doesn't really sell luxury cars. He just shows up and shakes hands with men my father already knows. Trent has the kind of confidence that only comes from never having actually been tested. He played lacrosse in high school. He still talks about it. And then there's me, the older sister, the creative one. The one my mother once described to a stranger at a wedding as still finding her footing. When I was 28 years old and had been paying my own rent for 9 years. Here's what nobody at that engagement dinner knew. The thing they were laughing about, the little side hustle, the cute hobby. 4 years ago, I quietly built a software platform that takes raw e-commerce data from small Shopify and Etsy and Amazon sellers and translates it into clean tax-ready reports. The kind of reports that used to take a small business owner 40 hours and an accountant they couldn't afford. My platform does it in 12 minutes. I called it Threadline. I built it alone in a 1-bedroom in East Asheville on a desk my landlord left behind. I taught myself Python from YouTube. I taught myself SQL from a book that was 12 years out of date. I lost weight I didn't need to lose. I cried in a shower a lot. And 3 weeks before that engagement dinner, a fintech holding company out of Charlotte signed a letter of intent to acquire Threadline for $9 million. I hadn't told anyone in my family. Not one person. I told myself it was because I wanted to wait until the deal closed. That was a lie. I knew it was a lie even when I was telling it to myself. The truth was, I knew exactly what would happen the moment my family found out I had real money. The roles would shift. The script would break. And I wasn't ready to find out what they did when they couldn't make me the joke anymore. So at that engagement dinner, when Bridget laughed at my little stickers, I said nothing. I just paid attention, because Bridget said something else earlier in the evening that I hadn't quite processed in real time. When my father asked her how work was going at her fund, she'd said, "Oh, we're chasing this gorgeous little fintech right now. Super under the radar, the kind of thing where if you move fast, you can really squeeze the founder." Indie tech. Basically built by some woman in a basement, but the product is sticky. Indie tech. Basement. Woman. I let it pass at the time. I'd been so busy fortifying my walls against the next personal jab that I'd missed the actual signal. Now, with a piece of overpriced halibut in front of me and my mother and Bridget cooing over kitchen tile, the signal lit up like a flare. I excused myself to the restroom. I sat on a closed toilet lid in a stall, and I opened my email on my phone. I scrolled back 6 weeks. There it was. A signed NDA inquiry from a venture group based in Dallas. The name on the signature line was a man I didn't recognize, but the email domain was the same fund Bridget worked for, the same fund my father had just asked her about. She wasn't chasing some random little fintech. She was chasing mine, and she didn't know she was sitting across from the founder. I walked back to the table. I sat down. I picked up my fork, and I made a decision that, looking back, probably saved me 10 years of therapy. I decided I wasn't going to say anything. Not yet, because I'm not the kind of person who flips tables. I'm the kind of person who reads the contract, who pulls the bank statements, who builds the case. My whole career is about looking at a column of numbers and finding the lie. And the lie at this table was bigger than Bridget. The lie was everyone laughing along with her. So I smiled. I let my mother praise Bridget's earrings. I let my father tell the same story about his second cousin's boat that he told at every dinner since I was 12. I let Trent put his arm around Bridget and call her my brilliant girl, while she patted his chest like a Labrador. I ate my halibut. I drank my water. I paid attention. And when my mother, on the curb afterward, hugged me a little too hard and whispered, "Sweetie, please try to be a little warmer with Bridget. She's going to be family," I just nodded. "Of course, Mom." I drove back to my apartment. I sat on my couch. I didn't cry. I didn't punch a pillow. I opened my laptop, and I went to work. The first thing I did was check my server logs. Threadline runs on a stack I designed myself, which means I see everything. Every login attempt, every API call, every demo request. I'd handed out a limited featured demo 6 months ago to a handful of VC firms because that's what you do when you're trying to gauge interest. Bridget's firm had been on the list. I'd flagged it then because I'd seen her last name on the partner roster and recognized it from a thing Trent had said. At the time, I figured the world was small. I figured maybe she'd peek at the demo, get bored, move on. What I found that night, sitting on my couch in pajama pants with a mug of tea going cold next to me, made my fingers go quiet on the keyboard. The demo I'd sent to her firm had been accessed 63 times in 6 weeks. 63. A normal VC firm pokes at a demo twice, maybe 3 times before deciding. 63 times is not evaluation. 63 times is excavation. I dug deeper. The IP addresses were clustered into 2 buckets. The official firm IP and a residential one in Dallas. I cross-referenced the residential one against a property record search. The address was a townhouse owned by an LLC. The LLC's registered agent was a law firm Bridget's family had used for 2 generations. I knew this because my mother, who never met a name she couldn't drop, had once told me Bridget's family uses the same attorney as the Hunts. Can you imagine? So Bridget wasn't just poking at my product from her office, she was taking it home. I went deeper still. The demo I'd sent out had a feature flag I'd hidden in the code. Not malicious, just protective. If anyone tried to scrape the data architecture or copy the schema, the system silently logged the attempt and took a screenshot of the active session. I opened the protected folder. 47 screenshots. The first was a partial schema dump with handwritten notes in the margins photographed off a screen. The handwriting matched a thank you card Bridget had sent my mother 2 months earlier, which my mother had displayed on her console table like a relic. The next 20 were architecture diagrams someone had been redrawing. Mine, but relabeled. The product name at the top, in clean draft type, was Stitchline. She hadn't even tried hard, and in screenshot 31, there was a Slack window open in the background of the photo. The visible message read, "Move fast on the indie. Founder doesn't have legal muscle." We clone the core, file the patents under our LLC, and offer to acquire her for nuisance value once she figures it out. The center's avatar was a small purple circle with the initial B. I sat there. The tea was fully cold now. The radiator clicked once in the corner. I had a feeling I'd never had before, and I want to describe it accurately, because I think a lot of women have felt it and don't have a word for it. It wasn't rage. It was the opposite of rage. It was something cold and very, very still. It was the feeling of finally seeing the whole board. This woman was going to marry my brother. She was going to come to every Thanksgiving for the rest of my parents' lives. She had already, in the 4 months they'd been dating, become my mother's favorite person on earth. And in her spare time on a couch in Dallas with a glass of wine, she'd been planning to steal 4 years of my life and rebrand it. And my family had no idea. And even if they had known, I had this very clear, very ugly suspicion they wouldn't have cared. I closed the laptop. I went to bed. I slept. 2 weeks later, the wedding invitation arrived. Cream cardstock, hand-deckled edges, a wax seal in dusty rose, the kind of invitation that costs more per envelope than my first month's rent in college. The ceremony was at a vineyard outside Charlottesville. Of course it was. The reception was in a converted barn that had been converted so many times it was basically just a hotel ballroom pretending to be folksy. Black tie optional, which is rich person code for yes, black tie. I sat at my kitchen table and held the invitation in my hands. My first instinct, my real human instinct, was to text my brother and tell him what I'd found. To send him the screenshots. To say, Trent, you are marrying a woman who is currently trying to financially gut your sister. Please open your eyes. But I'd grown up in this family. I knew exactly what Trent would do. He would forward the screenshots to Bridget. Bridget would cry beautifully. Trent would call me, not to ask if it was true, but to ask why I was trying to ruin his happiness. My mother would call within the hour. My father would call before bed. And by morning, the whole family would have agreed that I, the difficult older sister, had once again invented a crisis to make myself the center of attention. I'd seen the playbook 100 times. I wasn't going to hand them the script. I put the invitation on my fridge. I RSVP'd yes. Then I called my lawyer. Her name was Myrelle and she'd been my corporate counsel for 2 years. She was 61 and didn't suffer anyone. When I told her what I had, she was quiet for a long moment and then she said, "How do you want this to go?" "I want it clean," I said. "I want it documented. I want it filed before the wedding. And I want her to find out in front of people." "Honey," Myrelle said, and I could hear her smile through the phone. "That's 3 different goals. Let me work." In the next 4 weeks, a lot of things happened that nobody at the wedding would see. The acquisition by the holding company in Charlotte closed. The wire hit my account on a Tuesday morning. I stared at the number for a long time. It didn't feel like money. It felt like permission. Myrelle's firm filed a preliminary IP infringement complaint, paired with a cease and desist directed at the LLC behind Bridget's little side project. The filing was sealed pending further review, which is a fancy way of saying nobody outside the case could see it yet. But it was filed. The clock was ticking. The next move was hers. I had my forensic data expert package the 47 screenshots and the server logs into a tidy little PDF with timestamps and hash verifications. The kind of file that, in a courtroom, becomes a fact and not a story. And I bought a new dress. Not navy. I'd worn navy to every family event for 10 years because my mother once told me, when I was 19, that I didn't have the coloring for anything brighter. This dress was emerald, long sleeves, high neck, a cut that didn't apologize for anything. I tried it on in the store and I looked in the mirror and I almost didn't recognize the woman looking back. She looked like someone who finally had her own light. The morning of the wedding, I drove down to Charlottesville with a garment bag in the back seat and a USB stick in the glove compartment. I checked into a small inn 10 minutes from the vineyard. I did my own makeup. I curled my hair with the same drugstore wand I'd had since 2019. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror for a long time. I want to tell you what I was feeling, because I think the version where I say I was calm and powerful would be a lie. The truth is I was scared. I was 31 years old and I was about to break, in public, a family pattern that had been running for as long as I'd been alive. I didn't know who I was going to be on the other side of it. My hands shook when I clasped my earrings. I drove to the vineyard. I sat in the back during the ceremony. Bridget walked down the aisle in a dress that probably cost more than the average American salary. And my mother cried, and my father did the little nod he does when he wants people to see him being moved. And Trent looked at Bridget like she was a trophy he'd won at a carnival. The ceremony ended. The cocktail hour happened. I drank a club soda and let 3 different distant cousins ask me when I was going to find someone. I smiled and said I was focused on work. They laughed indulgently. One of them patted my arm. The reception began. I found my place card at table 14, which is the table they put you at when they want you near the kitchen but technically still inside the room. I sat. I watched the toasts. Bridget's father gave a speech about love conquering all that he had clearly outsourced to ChatGPT. My father gave a speech about the merging of 2 gray families, which made it sound like a corporate transaction, which it sort of was. Trent gave a speech that thanked himself 3 times before it thanked Bridget once. And then the best man, Trent's college roommate, took the microphone, said something about how the night was a celebration, and asked if anyone else would like to say a few words. This was not a planned moment. This is just a thing some best men say. I stood up. The whole room turned. I felt my mother's head snap toward me from the head table like a bird hearing a predator. I walked up to the microphone. The best man, sweet kid, handed it to me with a grin. He didn't know. "Hi," I said. My voice did not shake. I was as surprised as anyone. "I'm the groom's sister. A lot of you don't know me, which is okay. I want to say a few things about family, and about my new sister-in-law, and about what tonight actually means." The room got that specific kind of quiet that only happens when 200 well-dressed people sense that something is about to go off script. "I've been thinking a lot lately about the word quiet," I said. "My mother likes to call me her quiet daughter. My brother sometimes calls me the quiet one, the quiet sister, the quiet creative." I smiled, the kind of smile I've been practicing in mirrors for a month. I always thought it was a compliment. I'm starting to realize it's just a description of the position they assigned me. I let that sit. My mother at the head table was holding her wine glass very still. "For 4 years," I said. "While everyone was busy noticing my brother, I was building a company, a piece of software. It helps small business owners do something the big tax software companies don't want them to be able to do, which is keep their own books without going broke. I named it Threadline. I didn't tell anyone in my family because, well, you can probably guess why." I looked at Bridget. Her face was doing something complicated. 3 weeks before the engagement dinner where Bridget so generously called my work a cute hobby, I said, "I signed a letter of intent with a fintech holding company in Charlotte. The deal closed last month. They acquired Threadline for $9 million. There was a small, sharp sound at the head table. My mother had set her wine glass down too hard. "I would have told you all sooner," I said very gently. "But I was a little busy with something else." I lifted my phone. I'd had my Reels team prepare a single slide, just one. I'd brought a tiny pocket projector in my clutch because of course I had. I'd been planning this for weeks. The slide projected itself onto the white linen drape behind the dance floor. It was screenshot 31. The Slack message: "Move fast on the indie. Founder doesn't have legal muscle. We clone the core, file the patents under our LLC, and offer to acquire her for nuisance value once she figures it out." The little purple bee in the corner. The room made the sound a room makes when 200 people inhale at the exact same time. I didn't look at Bridget yet. I looked at my brother. I wanted to give him the gift, just for a second, of being the person I looked at first. "Trent," I said, "I love you. I am so sorry. The woman you just married has been trying to steal my company for the last 6 months. I have 47 more pages of this. They have already been filed with the federal court. Her firm's general counsel was served on Wednesday." I turned to Bridget. She was on her feet. Her face had gone the color of paper. She started to say something. The first syllable of "that's not," and I held up one hand. "You can talk in the deposition," I said. My voice was level. It surprised me. Right now I'm finishing my toast. I turned back to the room. "I want to say one more thing," I said. "Not to Bridget, to my parents. My mother had a hand pressed against her chest. My father was sitting very, very still. You raised me to be quiet. You praised it. You rewarded it. Every time someone at this kind of dinner picked at me, you smiled and made room for them to keep going, because you'd rather have a quiet daughter than a true one. And I want you to know that's over. Not because I'm angry. I'm not anymore. It's over because I just don't need it. I have my own table now. I set the microphone gently down on the stand. I walked out of the barn. I drove back to the inn. I changed into jeans. I sat on the edge of the bed and I cried for about 20 minutes. And then I stopped, and I ordered a turkey sandwich from the inn's late-night menu, and I ate it sitting cross-legged on top of the comforter while watching a baking show on my phone. That was the night. The fallout was almost boring, which is something nobody warns you about. Real consequences in the real world don't look like a movie. They look like emails. Bridget's firm placed her on administrative leave on Monday morning. By Wednesday, she was out. Her bar status with the firm was untouched. Because she didn't have one, she wasn't an attorney, but her name was quietly scrubbed from the partner page. By Friday, the LLC behind Stitchline had filed for dissolution. MyReal said this was Bridget's lawyers trying to make the entity disappear before discovery hit. It didn't work. The dissolution actually made things easier for us. Trent did not call me. Not for 9 days. When he finally did, he didn't apologize. He said, "Was it really necessary to do that in front of everyone?" I told him yes. I told him I tried to find a version that didn't require it, and there wasn't one. Because in our family, the only thing that broke through was a public record. I told him I loved him and I hoped he was okay. He hung up. My mother called 12 times in the first week. The voicemails went in order: furious, lecturing, wounded, performatively sad, conspiratorial, "We can fix this together if you just," bargaining, and finally, on day 6, a voicemail where she just said my name 3 times and then hung up. I haven't called her back yet. I don't know when I will. Maybe in a year. Maybe in 5. Maybe never. I'm letting myself not decide. My father sent one email. The subject line was a few thoughts. I deleted it without opening it. I felt nothing about deleting it, which was its own kind of answer. Bridget tried, briefly, to sue me for defamation. Her lawyers dropped the case within 10 days. Defamation requires the statement to be false. 47 screenshots are not false. The marriage was annulled within 2 months. Not over the company. Over a separate thing that came out in Discovery, which I won't get into because some of it isn't my story to tell. Trent went back to selling cars he doesn't sell at a dealership my father partly owns. He didn't lose his job. He lost the only thing he'd ever actually cared about, which was the audience. Bridget had been his audience. My parents had been his audience. The country club had been his audience. And the audience had quietly turned its chairs. Here's what I learned, and I want to say it carefully because I don't want it to sound like a poster on a dentist's wall. A family that has cast you in a role will not let you leave the role quietly. They will only let you leave the role if you walk off the stage so completely that the play can't continue without you. And when you do that, they will not call it growth. They will call it betrayal. That's okay. Let them. The word for it doesn't matter once you're off the stage. The other thing I learned is something I want to say to anyone watching this who has been the quiet one, the boring one, the safe one, the one they talk over. Listen to me. The quiet you've been carrying is not a flaw. It's a workshop. It's where you've been making the thing they don't know about yet. Maybe it's a company. Maybe it's a manuscript. Maybe it's a savings account they don't know exists. Maybe it's just a future where they aren't invited. It doesn't have to be revenge. Mine wasn't really, even though I know it looked like it. Mine was just a receipt. I'd been collecting receipts for 31 years, and on a Saturday night in a barn outside Charlottesville, I finally cashed one in. I'm in Lisbon now. I rented a small apartment for 6 months with a balcony that gets the morning sun. And I'm working on the next thing, which I'm not going to tell you about because I learned my lesson about telling people too early. I sleep through the night now. I didn't realize I hadn't been until I started. If you've ever sat at a table where the people who were supposed to love you were laughing at you, I want you to know 2 things. The first is that it wasn't your job to be smaller so they could feel bigger. The second is that the quiet you've been keeping is yours, not theirs. They don't get to call it boring anymore. Not after what you're building with it. Thank you for sitting with me through this. If any of it landed, leave a comment and tell me what role your family cast you in and what you'd build if you stopped playing it. I read them. I really do. And if you want to hear what happened 6 months later, when one of them showed up at my apartment in Lisbon and knocked on the door at 8 in the morning, well, that's the next one. I think about that dinner a lot now, sitting on this Lisbon balcony with the morning sun on my hands, and I keep coming back to one small thing. Bridget didn't ruin my life that night. She just showed me what had been true the whole time. The laugh my father gave when she called my work a hobby wasn't new. The tinkling sound my mother made wasn't new. The grin on Trent's face wasn't new. What was new was that I finally heard it. Cause and effect is a quiet law. It doesn't shout. For 31 years, I had absorbed every small dismissal at every family table, and I had told myself I was being mature, I was keeping the peace, I was being the bigger person. But I wasn't. I was teaching my family that there was no cost. Every time I smiled instead of speaking, I was paying their tab. And tabs come due. Mine came due in a barn outside Charlottesville, on a Saturday night, in a green dress. Here is what I want to leave with you, gently, because I'm not a person who likes loud lessons. The first thing is about integrity. Bridget didn't get caught because I was clever. She got caught because she was sloppy, and she was sloppy because she had built a life on the assumption that women like me don't fight back. Her dishonesty wasn't a single act at a laptop in Dallas. It was a habit, and habits leave footprints. When you build your work on what's true, you don't have to remember what you said. When you build it on what's convenient, the receipts pile up behind you whether you want them to or not. That isn't karma, it's bookkeeping. The second thing is about your mind. For 4 years, I sat at a desk that wobbled and taught myself things I had been told I wasn't smart enough to learn. Nobody clapped. Nobody noticed. There were nights I genuinely thought I was wasting my life. I want to tell you, if you are in one of those nights right now, that the work you do in private when nobody is watching is the only work that ever actually changes anything. Trent had an audience his whole life and he built nothing. I had no audience and I built Threadline. The audience is not the prize. The audience is the distraction. And the third thing is about the quiet itself. My family used my quiet as evidence that I was small. I want you to understand, deeply, that your quiet is not a verdict on you. It's a room. What you put in that room is your choice. You can fill it with their voices, replaying the dinners, rehearsing the comebacks you didn't say. Or you can lock the door and build something inside it that they don't get to see until you're ready. Meryl told me once on a phone call I'll never forget that the strongest people she'd ever worked with were not the ones who exploded. They were the ones who stayed seated, kept eating, and went home to do the math. I want that for you. Stay seated, eat your food. Drive home, open your laptop. The table they seated you at is not the only table in the world. There is one with your name on it that you haven't built yet. Go build it.